This is a walkthrough of the Honeywell zone panel, the Honeywell zone dampers, and the zone damper. Okay, so let's get started. This here is how the zone panel looks when you come to it. Now, if you notice, there are holes at the top and at the bottom, and that's designed so that you can actually put the wires in through here. So you don't necessarily have to have them all through the sides like a spider like this. You can, it's an option. There's something back here like that, but those are also options. So the wires can actually be hidden really well if they come in through the top or bottom. Next, inside of the panel here, there is a tech support phone number always on the bottom there, and they're very good when it comes to tech support. So you can call there and ask whatever questions you have. Be ready when you call to have that zone number there, right? And obviously, if you're calling, you should know what type of unit you have. Don't call if you don't know what type of unit you have. Okay, so let's take a look here. Now, the way this works is, if you can see, there is two thermostats and two zones. So this here says zone 1 damper, which is usually downstairs, and then there's a thing that says thermostat. So this thermostat controls this damper. And then we have a zone 2 damper and a thermostat. So this thermostat is controlling that damper, and this thermostat is controlling that damper. Down here, we have the ambient temperature sensor. So that goes in here and then goes into the duct according to the instructions. Right here is the power. Now I want to talk about this. This is very important. This is where you put a separate transformer. Every zone panel should have a separate transformer, and that transformer should be at least 40 VA. Now we'll get to the dampers in a second, but each one of these dampers pulls 7 VA. So if you have a 40 VA transformer, each one of these is 7 VA. So you can have a good number of these on that dedicated transformer. Now this is the one thing, well, two things that people typically miss on these. You see on this typical one, this has a W1 and a W2. So if you have a single stage unit, it's just a 2 heat, 1 cool unit. What you'd have to do on the W and W2 on the thermostat sides, you would put a jumper. So you need a jumper on W1 and W2 on the thermostat side, and then you need a jumper on W1 and W2 on the equipment side in order for that aux heat to work properly on this zone panel. If you have the base model one, it doesn't have a W1 and a W2. Those are just created strictly for a 2 heat, 1 cool, so there's no configuration. But if you're using this one here that looks like this, you'll have to jump those. Now, one thing that's very important is when you have a dedicated transformer, because you have to have one for this, you're going to obviously wire it here on R and C, but the thermostats actually need to be wired to the dedicated transformer, not the unit transformer. I'll say that again. So you have, let's say, a heat pump right there. You wire it up, you take R from the unit transformer, and you run it to the thermostat, right? And then you take C, and you run that to the thermostat, right? Not when you have a zone board. What you're going to do is you're going to go to the separate dedicated transformer, then you're going to run R from the separate transformer to the thermostat, and then C from the separate transformer to the thermostat. And what that separate transformer is going to do is it's going to run all the thermostats, all the dampers, and the zone panel. On the equipment side, you are going to put the unit transformer on R, right? Okay, so the unit transformer goes to R right here. You're just wiring the red down to the actual dedicated transformer, and that's what you're going to do on the thermostat side, okay? So very important. Remember that. If you have any doubts on that, call this tech support number and ask them, all right? Okay, now on this, you have your settings here that you're going to go in and set. You're going to make sure that you go into advanced config. If you have any problems with this DAT sensor, a lot of times that will cause a lot of problems. You can disconnect it and then go down here into advanced config and turn the DAT sensor off. But a lot of times you go to a service call and you'll find that they don't have these settings right. So these settings, if you have a 2 heat, 1 cool heat pump, it needs to be set that way. If you have a conventional gas furnace, it has to be set unconventional. Okay? All right, I think we covered most things on here. Let's go to the actual dampers. Okay, this is a Honeywell zone damper. Now these dampers are open. They're powered closed, so they're naturally springing open. What that means is this thing, if there's no power on it at all, if the unit is off, everything's off, there's no 24 volts on, this thing is going to be open. The damper is going to have a spring like this. So you see that's open, that's going to allow airflow just like that. When 24 volts goes on to this unit, so there's a spring that springs this open, right? So if I were to close this, if the damper was on there and let it go, it would spring just like that. So the spring is opening it. The damper has to get 24 volts and the motor actually closes that, okay? Goes that way, right? So that's closed, that's open. You need 24 volts to close it. The way that we do that is we put a wire on M1, which is common, and M6. So there's an M1, an M4, and an M6. And you'll notice M4, the word open has 4 letters in it, O-P-E-N. The word closed has 6 letters in it, C-L-O-S-E-D. That's how Honeywell came up with that. So you can always remember these are power closed dampers because they spring open, they need power to close. So if you need power to close, you need to wire it on M1. So we see zone 1 damper, we're going to wire M1 in M1. We're going to carry that wire to the zone damper and we're going to put that on M1. We're going to go from M to M. Okay. Now, if you're in a dark crawl space or a basement or an attic and the zone damper is way over there and you can't see this little open close thing because you can tell right here it says open and there's a white line and here it says closed. That white line is going to be like this when the damper is open and it's going to be like this when the damper is closed because you're not always going to be able to look. I mean, you can't look inside here. So you're going to look at that visual indicator. If you verify that it opens and closes and you're continuing to work, you can also see the red light. When the damper is closed, it's getting power to close, there's going to be a red light there. And when the damper is open, there's going to be a green light there if you put a wire on M4. So if you want to see a green and a red, what you're going to do to the panel is you're going to wire M1 to common, M1 to M1 on the damper, M4 to M4 on the damper, and M6 to M6. And what that'll do is when this thing closes, it'll show you a red light. And when it opens, it'll show you a green light. Now, to change this damper, all you need to do, this is going to be exactly like this, all right? This is from Honeywell to Honeywell. So if you're changing a Honeywell damper to a Honeywell damper, whether it's this new style or the old one, there is going to be a screw here. You'll need an Allen wrench. You need to go in here. It'll be just like this. You'll have to go in between here, loosen that Allen screw, and then it'll just come straight out. Then when you put the new one on, what you'll have to do, since this is automatically open, you'll have to open the damper. Okay, so make sure that you get it open like that. Then you put it on. Go ahead and just push it on. Get that thing in the right position, and then go ahead and tighten your screw. That way, it'll be open like this, and when it gets power, the damper will close it. Easy. Should be a 5 or 10 minute change. Now, if you see this red thing here, this is to set it to not completely close to a certain extent. All right, so it's the only way I can describe it right now. Actually, so this is wide open here. And then this is partially closed. This is a little bit more closed. So you get it. You can adjust this damper here for 17% bleed, 30% bleed, and 50% bleed. And the reason you do that, they put that on there because you may not have enough space to put a bypass damper. You can actually use this for a bleed. All right. So Hopefully that helps you a little bit on dampers. Went over just an easy, quick change, super quick. The dampers, these things are power closed. You're going to use M1 and M6, and you're going to wire the thermostats to the separate dedicated transformer.